Just want to talk for a second about this issue of Tibetan riots and Tibetan rioters and Tibetan violence. From a Tibetan standpoint, from someone who works on this issue all the time, and also many of my friends and family and supporters, everyone's concerned that the way that things are being portrayed is exactly the way the Chinese government wants it to be portrayed. That rather than talking about a freedom movement, rather than talking about the courage and the bravery of a vast majority of Tibetans who took to the streets and even are still taking the streets over the past 2 weeks to ask for freedom and independence, we keep hearing about Tibetan violence and Tibetan rioters and seeing images of from the Chinese side of the shops that were burned and the victims, the Chinese victims of these vicious Tibetan mobs. And I just want to say something about the fact that we can't forget that it's the Tibetans who are oppressed. It's the Tibetans who are under occupation. It's Tibetans who've suffered for 50 and 60 years, facing one of the most powerful, strong, brutal regimes in the world, facing their military force with mostly nonviolent response. This all started without much attention from the world inside Tibet. This most recent uprising with monks marching for their rights, sitting in, raising slogans. And that went on for some days before something sparked the confrontation. And from Tibetan side, you have to understand that we most likely feel like that the violence could have come from originally the Chinese side, because look at the images that have come out of Lhasa. You see a bunch of monks sitting in, chanting, fighting for their rights, surrounded by Chinese soldiers, surrounded by people armed, armed oppressors, the colonizer there, threatening our people, our people staring down the barrel of a gun once again. And so, it's just so important, and I want to just make an appeal to young Tibetans and our supporters and people everywhere to remember to refocus the issue when people want to talk about Tibetan violence and Tibetan rioters. Remind them it's a freedom struggle. It's a freedom movement. This was an uprising of courageous, amazing, brave, wonderful Tibetan souls who, despite being fearful, not like they were fearless, despite knowing that they would likely die, be imprisoned, could be tortured, families could be, terrorized for their actions, they took to the streets and against all odds, and after all this time, raised their voices for freedom, for independence, for a long life to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And may none of us forget that, and may everybody remember to use this moment to bring it back to the real issue here, which is one of sovereignty. It's not about Tibetan violence, it's about Chinese violence. And while there may be some acts of violence on the parts of Tibetans, it's up to us to bring this issue into focus for people, and to have the world understand, to have young Chinese understand, and to have the Chinese leadership get it, that this is what it's about. It's about freedom. In fact, I would say the Chinese leadership knows. That's exactly what they don't want the world to hear or see. And that's why they're doing things the way they are. And that's why they're showing the images the way they are. And it's up to us to make sure that this, isn't the way it goes down. All those people who just risked everything inside Tibet, students, monks, nuns, 16-year-old schoolgirls, they didn't die for this. They're not suffering just so the world can see this as an issue of violence and ethnic conflict. It's not.